Our scripture lesson this morning comes from the mystic Gospel of John. Jesus is on his way toward his fulfilling his task of giving his life for all humanity so that we might know what unconditional love is. So hear this good word from John 13:31 through 35. When he was gone, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself, and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." So it seems, according to this passage, that glorification and discipleship have one thing in common, and that one thing in common is love. Not just any kind of love, but genuine love. Jesus tells his disciples that he is glorified in God, and God is glorified in him. And do we have that slide, Mike? Let's go ahead and put that up. I want to show you what the Greek word for love is. Do we have that? We don't have that? Okay. Well, let me then share it with you. This is what the Greek word means to glorify: praise, extol, magnify, hold in honor, to make glorious, adorn with splendor, to cause the dignity and worth of some person or thing to become manifest and acknowledged. So this glorification became manifest in the way that Jesus loved. Now, when he's teaching his disciples this, he says, "My little children." Now, we get an indication of where he is relationally with his disciples at this point. Because the Greek word for little children is teknia, which is, in a literal sense, little child. But it also was a phrase that was commonly used between teachers and their disciples. However, in the Koine Greek in the first century, the scholars have found it used in other contexts. And really, what it was most commonly used for is a woman who carried and bore a child. So what Jesus is saying to his spiritual children is, I have carried you. I have given you birth. And now I send you on your way. You see? So what we see here is a wonderful, wonderful situation of that deep intimacy between good friends. You know what I'm talking about. You know, those times in life, it might be your spouse or your best friend, sometimes with our children, or sometimes it's just with someone that we kind of knew, but we stop, and it seems that everything stops around you, and you have this deep, engaged connection with another human being. So this is what we see taking place as Jesus is teaching his disciples and talking to them at this time. So he says to them, I have a new commandment for you, that you love one another. Now, the Greek word used here is agape, which we commonly know as unconditional love, love given for love's own sake. But what is also implied in the Greek in this text is that this is a reciprocal love. I love you unconditionally, and you love me back unconditionally. This is a new commandment I give you. Now, this is another thing that's very important, because I know you all are taking notes on Koine Greek. And I know this fascinates you. I hope it does, because it helps you to see the text more deeply so that it can communicate more deeply to your soul. But this text, this command was written in the subjunctive mood rather than the imperative. Right? So let me give you an example of what the differences would be. The imperative would be, you go out and love one another. Walter, you better go out and love people today, all right? I don't want anybody here not loving one another, because if you don't, there's going to be hell to pay, all right? That's the imperative. The subjunctive is, you haven't fully realized it yet, but I can see it in you. Your capacity to love is much greater than what you're living right now. You don't know it, but I can see it in you. And I want to encourage you to do all you can to take away any of those things in your spirit that block you. Whatever fears they might be, whatever egocentric issues you might have, whatever it is in your life that's blocking you from expressing and sharing your full self, I want you to encourage you to do that, because your capacity to love and to help others and make a difference in this world is much greater. See? That's the subjunctive. And this is what Jesus is doing with his disciples. This is what he's doing with his disciples. He's helping them to see that there's so much more to them. I have shared with you in the past a person who used to be a member of our church, but now is just a very dear friend, also a dear friend of the Snows, Patricia Smith. She mentored me for a couple of years because I found that I had reached a ceiling that I couldn't seem to get past, and so she was helping me to get past that. And I remember at one point, after a year or more of mentoring me, see, it took a lot of work. She'd say, Barton, if you just trust me and you do the things that we've talked about, if you employ the disciplines we've discussed, I promise you, you'll start experiencing the outcomes you long for. And I said, Patricia, I hear you, and I know you believe that, but somehow I can't see it. And then she said this. She says, I will hold on to this promise until you can hold on to it yourself, you see. And that's all I needed. That's all I knew that I didn't need to know it gnosko experientially in that moment, but if I just kept working toward that end, I would. And eventually I did, and I still do. See? But what it took was a change of discipline. It took a change of thinking. It took a change in decision-making and behaviors for me to be able to grow out of that and to become more my fullest self, to start experiencing my own glory and experiencing the glory of God. Now, the love that Jesus is speaking about here is not the kind of love you can will, right? It's not the kind of love. For example, I had a person share with me when she was growing up that her mother used to say to her, you're going to love me if I have to kill you. It doesn't work that way. I know growing up, I was told to love God or else, right? I loved God because I was afraid of what the alternatives were if I did not. That's not love. What Jesus is talking about here is a sense of genuine, something that is very real, something that comes from the deep core, the deep center of who we are as human beings. In our culture throughout all time, and in our literature, and in our plays, and our music, and our storytelling, it seems that most involve the struggle between good and evil, right? But as I have grown in my own journey, I see that really the struggle is not so much good and evil in as much as it is in between ego and spirit. And those who live in their egocentric selves are typically the ones creating all the mischief. But it seems to me that is where the struggle is, you see. To be able to experience real love, to be able to express and give genuine love, we have to deal with the egocentric issues that we have. And there are a couple that I want to mention to you this morning, and not going into great detail and discussing all the others because, well, there's only so much time. But two of the classic ones that I have experienced and have seen in others is one is the clinging vine. And this is a person who has been doted on so much as they were growing up that their whole sense of self and the worth depends on how other people are seeing them at the time. You are so beautiful. You are so special. You can do nothing wrong. Oh, you didn't get that part in the play. Well, it's because they don't see you as beautiful and talented as you are. Not that maybe you didn't work hard enough for. Everybody gets rejected, right? No. And so their whole sense of worth is contingent upon other people showering them with compliments, you see. They're dependent. They cling to this. Typically, they're very charming people. They're very likable people. Why? Well, because their whole sense of self-worth is contingent upon everybody liking them. and sing and praising them for all their gifts and their talents, right? So that would be one egocentric thing that hides one's center, because you see, people who are clinging and who are dependent on the praise of others for their self-worth haven't experienced themselves, so their center, the heart, their soul, their truest self is somehow blocked in, and they can't experience the genuine love, the agape that Jesus is talking about with his disciples. Another extreme case would be the hardened shell. This would be someone who grew up just the opposite of the other person I just spoke of. Someone who didn't experience love in the home. Someone who did not experience praise. Someone who grew up in a harsh environment. But they figured out early on that they could buck the system. They figured out early on they could endure the abuse. And they figured out early on, I don't need to love anyone. All I need to do is all I need to do to survive and make the best of life for me. Right? So whether or not you approve of them, whether or not you love them, doesn't mean anything. And what I find most fascinating is that there's those two personalities who usually attract each other in life, right? The clinging vine is needing someone to tell them what to do and to praise them all the time. The hardened shell is needing someone to tell what to do, and they don't want anybody who's thinking for themselves and who could challenge their authority. What I've also discovered, too, is that people who live in these two egocentric realms commonly live in fear, right? The clinging vine, fear that someone might not acknowledge how wonderful they are, and therefore they feel worthless. Or the hardened shell, fear that maybe somehow they will love somebody someday, and that somebody will leave them, right? So these two often will attract each other until one of them decides they've had enough, and then they have an emotional crisis, to where either they can grow and evolve and start allowing that center to crack open and their real selves come through, or they'll find another person to repeat the process with. So it really comes down to egocentric and spiritual reality. Am I going to allow my ego self to harden my heart, to put a wall around my truest self, my center, so that I can't truly experience the divine? Or am I going to take the risks that are necessary to allow myself to become vulnerable? You see, Jesus was not a doormat. And he did allow himself to become vulnerable. He chose to become vulnerable. And it was in his vulnerability that he found his incredible power and strength. He knew the divine, and the divine knew him because he did the work to know, first of all, who he truly was, and then to take the risk to express that. Another thing that we see in this is that to experience the glory is not a thing of someone from the outside saying, you're so wonderful. You know it within yourself regardless of whether people are taking it. And the glory is not so much the accolades for doing a good job, but the glory is knowing that you are living in your fullest self. And in doing that, you experience the divine more fully. Does that make sense? If I've got my heart, my soul, my center blocked off because I'm afraid for people to truly see what it is, then we also block ourselves off from the divine. This doesn't mean that God stops loving us until we do. It means that God is loving us. It's always been there, but we just can't see it because we've blinded ourselves to it. You know, it's kind of like when Marge and Alan, used to walk around Isleworth Golf Course, and Marge would talk about so-and-so changed their furniture on the patio. Alan didn't even know they had a patio, right? It was always there. Some see and some do not. God's love, God's glory is in all of us, but some of us are blinded to it because we're afraid. We're afraid. So, knowing God, experiencing God, knowing self and experiencing self is an intimate experience. So Jesus says to his disciples, he says, everyone will know you are my disciples by the way you what? You love one another. The Greek word to know is, there you go for you newbies, gnosko. Gnosko is a Greek word for knowing on an intimate level. For example, it just even goes as far as Joseph did not know Mary before she became, miraculously impregnated with Jesus, right? They did not know each other. That would be the same word. So gnosko is a Greek word which talks about a deep, intimate knowing. They will know intimately that you are my disciples. They will know experientially that you are my disciples in the way that you love one another. There's another Greek word in that sentence, verse 35, that's not deliberately translated into English, but I found added a lot of meaning to it. And that word is this. It means to have, to own, or possess, possession of mind, to be closely joined to a person or thing. So it's descriptive of the kind of love that the disciples have for each other. It's almost like they're possessed. We call it being joined at the hip, right? Those two are so close, they're joined at the hip. That's right? So it's this closeness, this almost a possession of mind, a deepness in the relationship and the love and the honor that they show one another. So, where do we go from here? Faith and love lead to the knowledge of God. Faith and love lead to the knowledge of God. Not fear, not walls. As we take the risk to expose our most intimate self, as we take the risk to allow others to look in and we share who we truly are, we make a miraculous discovery. We start to learn that the God we've always known about, now we seem to experience on a deeper level. What I find interesting as well is that people who are living in their egocentricity tend to project upon God their egocentricity. For the person who is the clinging vine and all the world is owed to them, and they always must have everything they ask for, and they have no idea what it means to fail and to have to rise above. When they fail, it's somebody else's fault. So guess how they project God? As that great vending machine in the sky. Oh God, I'm really in a hurry. I need that Princess parking place right up the front of the mall. Oh God, you didn't give it to me today. Oh, you have disappointed me. You know what I'm saying? Okay. The other egocentric belief that I can shut myself, I need no love. I don't depend on other people's accolades. I do what I do for myself. They might be really religious and devout, but their God is one that demands obedience at all costs, right? Jesus shows us a different kind of God. Jesus shows us that when we live and we transcend our egocentricity, that we have a knowledge and an experience of the divine that is so profound that not only does it transform our lives, but it transforms the lives of those around them. Look, Jesus had to work through his egocentricity like all the rest of us, all right? Let me say, are you familiar with Michael Phelps, one of the greatest Olympians ever, won more gold medals? Do you think he just jumped in the pool in the Olympics and started swimming like that? We see the glory of the medals and winning the races, right? But what we don't see is from the time he was a small boy, all those hours swimming in those pools, hours after hours after hours of training and developing his body and learning his craft and perfecting his swimming skills. We don't see all of that. All we see is the glory. Jesus, like all the rest of us, had to perfect his own skills and abilities, and he too had to work through his egocentric ways. It started with the wilderness experience, remember? He had to decide what kind of person he was going to be to fulfill his role on this earth. So he looked down and he was fasting in the wilderness and he saw all those rocks and he thought, if I could turn rocks to bread, that would make me very popular. Also, if I could provide enough bread through rocks for everyone to eat, then they would become dependent on me, right? But one does not live by bread alone. Then he took himself in his imagination to the pinnacle of the temple, and he imagined himself just flinging himself off of about 300 feet, just flinging himself off and coming down like Dr. Strange, right? Just levitating right to the ground. See, yeah, you can tell those who read the comics and watch them. If I could do that, think how I could dazzle the masses. I'd get a sponsorship from Red Bull, and now I'm set. Get YouTube channel, get my own sponsors, and I could get people to follow me because they're waiting to see what kind of dazzling thing I'm going to do next. Jesus is working through his egocentric self. Then there's the whole, I could rule the world. I have to confess to you, that has never been a temptation of mine. But him thinking to himself, what if I am smarter than everybody else? What if I can use my powers and my charisma to get a massive army and I could rule the world? All I have to do is bow down to my egocentricity. But then he says, you don't worship other gods, right? So he worked through that. Then there was another time, Caesarea Philippi. There was the pantheon of all the Roman gods there. And he asked his disciples, who do people say I am? And they said, Moses, Elijah. Then he asked the question, who do you say I am? And they all were looking for the answer in the dust and up into the sky. And finally, Peter blurts out, you're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Oh, Peter, it's not flesh and blood. It's not ego who revealed that to you, but rather than the Spirit and the power of God within you. Now, the Son of humanity must now let himself be arrested, crucified, and then I will live forever and ever and ever. And Peter got in his face and wagged his finger and says, you will not do it. And Jesus responded just as powerfully. Why? I believe because it was in that moment Jesus was tempted because he loved his disciples. He loved his life. He loved his friends. He was tempted maybe not to go through with it. But he had to work through that in order to fulfill his most fullest self. And then the last place we see his ego trying to overtake him, which is a very natural thing to do, was at Gethsemane, right before he was to be arrested. All of a sudden, this turning myself over and going through and enduring incredible suffering and pain is no longer an abstract thing. It's about to happen. And he's praying all by himself and alone because his disciples fell asleep. God, if there's any other way for me to fulfill my purpose, please let me know it now. And all he heard was that deafening silence. Not my will, but yours. You see, Jesus had to go through that process, as do all of us. And it's when we take those risks, it's when we allow the cracks to happen inside of our fortress walls, to allow the light to come in and the light to pour out, that we start becoming our fullest selves. This is when we start to experience glorification, honor, love, celebration, not because we're wanting accolades from those around us, but because we know, gnosko, experientially, that we are living in connection with the divine, and that I can see God, and God can see me. I'm glorified in God, and God is glorified in me because I'm becoming my truest, real self, which is the greatest expression of love you can offer to the world and to those around you. It's that kind of love that transforms lives. Faith in God is not an intellectual exercise. That doesn't mean you don't read, you study, love the Lord your God with all your mind, your heart, your body, and soul. But it's not an intellectual exercise. It's an experiential exercise. I love God. Don't ask me to prove it, because I have no desire to. I love God because I have experienced the divine in profound and wonderful ways. I love God not because I'm afraid of eternal damnation. I love God because I love God. I know that somehow I am a part of that divine essence that penetrates all the universe and everywhere beyond. And because I can somehow experience that realness, that spirit within me, then I can also increase my capacity to see it in you. And know that sometimes I can overlook things that you do that drive me crazy. And also know that you too have also evolved, that you can overlook me. I can sense and I can feel that essence in all of creation and everything around me. You see, as I grow in my capacity to allow my fullest self to pour out, it also allows the glory of God to pour in. And I experience it. I don't need to prove it. I can't. It's just I know it, gnosko, because I have experienced it. It's when we follow the example of Jesus, that example being he worked through those barriers which kept him closed. He took the risk to show people who he was, and he did not compromise it, even in the face of great pain and suffering. He chose to be the best, fullest Jesus he could be. And it's in that he was glorified and God was. And I can promise you today that every day I work at being the best Barton I can be. Some days I'm much more successful at it than others, but I work at it every day. Just like Michael Phelps practiced swimming, I practice on being the best human being I can be every day. And I do not command you in the imperative sense, but I, in the subjunctive sense, say, you have the capacity to be incredibly glorious human beings. And we've done some really good things together, but we can do so much more if we would just allow ourselves to let the fears disappear and allow ourselves to connect more consciously and intimately with the divine center in us all, and then let it pour freely as it has poured freely to us. And that, my friends, is what it means to be glorified. Praise, extol, magnify, hold in honor, to make glorious, adorned with splendor, to cause the dignity and worth of someone or something to become manifest and acknowledged. So, oh, glorious ones, continue your work. We're all on the right track. Let us pray. Gracious God, beautiful God, thank you for showing yourself to us so profoundly in the life of Jesus and many other human beings who've lived on this planet, who took the risk to show us their most powerful and beautiful selves. May we be agents of transformation for the world around us as those who've taken that risk before us have done for us. May we know that there is nothing that can separate us from your love. There is nothing that can destroy us except our own fears about letting others looking in, or our looking in our hearts and our souls ourselves. Oh, gracious, beautiful God, through the power of your Spirit, give us a level of courage that will help us all to start this journey, to continue the journey, and to fulfill the journey of glorifying you and you glorifying us. And may the world around us know that we are your followers and your disciples because of the way that we love one another. Amen.